Thank you very much, Jason, and the rest of the crew. Ohio is still a mess. Adults can now legally possess and grow marijuana in Ohio, but there's nowhere to buy it. Ohioans woke up last week in a land of limbo for recreational marijuana use. Adults can now legally grow and possess cannabis at home, cannot legally buy it. On Wednesday night last week, Republican Governor Mike DeWine urged lawmakers to quickly set parameters for Issue 2, the citizen initiative voters approved in November. Well, the state pushed through an 11th hour deal. Hours before the law took effect, the Ohio House adjourned without taking it up. Representative Jamie Callender said, quote, "There's no drop-dead date. We're implementing a legal sales scheme, and that growing marijuana at home or allowing possession can proceed according to the voters' wishes." He said he wants to, quote, "make sure we're thoughtful, that we have adequate time to look at it and deal with the things that don't go into effect immediately." Representative Bill Seitz also defended the decision to adjourn without acting on the 160 pages of related legislation now pending in the House. He said, "We're not going to pass sight unseen such a monstrous proposition in 48 hours. That's just nuts," he said. Lawmakers need time to work through the complexities of setting up cannabis sales, taxation, and a regulatory structure. Fine, however, worried openly about a worst-case scenario developing, saying black market sales could flourish or that fentanyl or pesticide-laced marijuana products might become more accessible. He called the current state of affairs a recipe for disaster. Lawmakers had 4 months last year to act. As a citizen-initiated statute, Issue 2 had to be submitted to the legislature first. After the GOP-controlled legislature chose to do nothing, the measure was placed on the November 7th ballot and passed with a 57% of the vote. It allows adults 21 and over to buy and possess up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis and to grow up to 6 plants per individual or 12 plants per household at home. Gave the state 9 months to set up a system for legal marijuana purchases subject to a 10% tax. Sales revenue was to be divided between administrative costs, addiction treatment, municipalities with dispensaries, paying for social equity and jobs programs, supporting the cannabis industry itself. Just days before the law took effect, Senate Republicans proposed a sweeping rewrite of what voters already approved, angering the issue's backers and alarming both parties in the House. It would have outlawed growing at home, cut the allowable amount of pot that can be possessed to 1 ounce, and raise taxes on purchases to 15% instead of 10%. It would also eliminate tax revenue for funding for social equity programs supporting the marijuana industry and direct most of the tax money raised to the general state government fund. Compromise negotiated with DeWine and approved 28-2 by the Senate on Wednesday would cut the number of household plants allowed to 6, retain the higher 15% tax on purchases, and reduce the allowable THC levels for cannabis extracts 90% to 50%. The deal would restore a 2.5 ounce possession limit, and allow 35% THC plants while nixing state control of most of the revenue. Drafters of the legislation garnered Democratic support in part, adding a provision to expunge the criminal records of people convicted of possession of 2.5 ounces or less. That measure would also require child-safe packaging and ban ads targeting children, a priority of the governor. If legislators veer too far from what voters approve, the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol or other opponents of Issue 2 can always pursue a referendum. Possibility should give lawmakers an incentive to work with proponents of more relaxed marijuana laws. And Stephen Steinglass, Dean Emeritus of Cleveland State University College of Law and a leading expert on Ohio's Constitution, said some of the maneuvering going on now is unprecedented. Voters have only approved 3 initiated statutes in 111 years, and none of the 3 have ever been amended, repealed, or fiddled with by the General Assembly. And President Matt Huffman said the Senate compromise respects voters while addressing important concerns. He said, "I'm opposed to legalization, but it's the law. We don't want illegal sales, black market, if you will, to get a foothold." Meanwhile, there are plenty of aspects of the new Ohio law that can be immediately enforced, said Louis Tobin, executive director of the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association. As of Thursday, it's going to be very difficult to find probable cause and prosecute people who are carrying around less than 2.5 ounces of marijuana. But prosecutors and law enforcement are still going to be on the lookout, he said. People smoking in cars, still breaking the law. People carrying around more than 2.5 ounces are still breaking the law. People engaging in private sales are still breaking the law. People driving under the influence are still breaking the law. This really sounds like what happened in Nevada as Nevada voters approved legislation of medical cannabis back in 2000. The program didn't get on board until 2014 because there was no place to buy cannabis. That was the big problem. You can have a license to smoke it, but you can't buy it anywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
And a judge found that constitutional. Remember all that? Right. So it took 14 years to put a program together after that.
Yeah, I remember.
It doesn't take 14 years in Ohio, right? So, and with that, I'm Todd Engen with High 9 News. Jason?
Yeah, Todd, I remember this. I remember even, too, like there was some cultivations that had all this flower that was ready, but because they didn't have a distributor license, they couldn't actually transport it down the hall to the retail to be able to package it to sell it.
Right, and dispensaries were illegal. So you can grow it and you can have it, but you just can't buy it anywhere. And then a local judge found it unconstitutional. The state took medical marijuana license money, patients, and didn't provide access.
Yep,
that's what shut it all down.
Yeah,
couple things stand out for me. The first is when you take taxes from anything and you put it in the general fund, that is the equivalent of being in second grade on the schoolyard, and that really big sixth grader comes over and takes your lunch money. Okay? So I'm never a proponent of just taking money out of this industry, putting it in a general fund, because that tax revenue, once it goes someplace, it's supporting this, it's supporting that. Oh, now we have children with cleft palates, it's funding their removal of this and that. And once those taxes get built into the model, it's really hard to go to peel those back or to taper those down and have less taxes. The other thing is, this is interesting to me, right? Because the voters passed this, and the voters are it's like the mob in Rome. It's fickle. You got to watch out for what voters are willing to agree to. They may not all be super sophisticated policy wonks. And I think it's an incredibly dangerous precedent when something is voted upon to think that those people who are entrusted in positions of power and public policy as elected officials should go back and twiddle and fiddle and muddle and fuddle with things under the auspices that they know better than the voters. That's a really slippery slope. And then when we have these conversations and they're quoting this risk of fentanyl and cannabis, that just really concerns me, because as far as I can tell, that's a false concern, and to have people making decisions around cannabis policy that don't know that fentanyl in cannabis isn't a thing leads me to wonder and worry whether they're going to be able to make educated decisions on any of this stuff.
A quick question here. Did the Ohio government inadvertently create the next batch of trappers here by opening up home grow and you can have possession? So these people are just gonna start growing and selling their own shit, like in their own backyards.
Exactly
right. in Ohio. It's a homegrown trap. Just popped up.
Are they allowing for outdoor home grow in Ohio? I thought it had to be inside.
It does say per household. It doesn't say.
I'm pretty sure in Ohio you cannot grow outdoors. You have to grow indoors. I think I remember reading something like that, but who knows? Maybe
either way, they're gonna be sitting on a glut of product, and there's gonna be a glut of people looking for product, and they don't have any.
What do you mean? They're just gonna drive to Michigan, bro? Are you serious? Where they can actually buy real eighths
why drive to Michigan
and not tents?
Why?
No one's driving.
You ain't got to
from the guy down the street. Yeah, no one's driving to fucking Michigan.
Oh, you should look at the data, Todd. You should look at the data.
They don't have to sell tents if you grow your own shit.
I mean, I I have high hopes for a state that's named Ohio. I mean, I'm sorry to get all dad grade joke on you, but Ohio was good to me a couple years ago. We did really well with dispensary development out there. I'm hopeful for the state. I think 2 ounces though is a modest amount. I mean, if you roll with Saman Razani, 2 ounces is just what you bring to the party.
And takes them 2 days to roll it.
Yeah, it does take them 2 days.
4 hours and 20 minutes to construct a Fabergé egg of blunts. But if you're going to roll the party, 2 ounces that's just enough to get the party started.